I'm no good as a daughter. I can't even be a woman right.
The Shadow Dragons say there are people who use they instead of he or she. They're not men or women. And I like how it feels when I imagine myself that way.
She wanted you to be the powerful, beautiful person you are.
Person, not woman.
You tell me, Tosh, what feels right to you?
Then, person. And using they for myself. I really like how that feels.
The stronger your team.
Nothing screams dark medieval fantasy and Dragon Age like talking about gender and feelings, am I right?
Against the gods?
Hey guys, this is Sweaty Zeus. This one pains me to do, and I'm sorry it took me so long to get out. I've been a little absent lately, trying to slog my way through this game. As you can tell, this probably isn't going to be my kindest review ever. Although it's not, the worst game I've ever played. It feels like it as a fan of the series. And a little background on my experience with Dragon Age. If you're new to my channel, a little background on myself as well. Years ago, I kind of got out of gaming, and I actually really got into Game of Thrones when that first came out. And I can't remember if it was Witcher 3 or Inquisition, Dragon Age Inquisition, which is the third in the series and the one directly before this one. So because I like that setting so much, and I had watched Game of Thrones and read the books, I was like, man, I'd love to play a game, in that kind of dark medieval fantasy setting. And it was about the time that Dragon Age Inquisition came out, and I had a friend that had been telling me to play Dragon Age, so I gave it a try. And yeah, I was totally hooked, loved it, played it all the way through all the DLC, and enjoyed the hell out of it. One of my favorite series still. Anyways, with all that said, without going on too long, it was a game that I loved enough that pulled me back into gaming by itself and really kind of got me into like RPGs and action RPGs, which I still play to this day. And the reason I gave you that information is because my review is definitely going to be reflective of what the series was in the past, what I expected, the tone of the series, where it's different here, the gameplay of the series, where it's different here, the art design of the series, where it's different here. And that's some of my biggest problems with it. If you take it out of that context and you've never heard or played of Dragon, you don't know Dragon Age from anything, and you pick this game up, I don't think it'd be the worst game you ever played. It'd probably be just kind of meh. It would be an average game. But for people that have played Dragon Age, and especially someone like myself who loves Dragon Age and was waiting for this one for so long, it's extremely painful. And it makes it one of the worst games I've ever played when that's considered. So, I'll go ahead and get into the review, but I did just want to say that, if you don't care about any of the story of the world, go check the game out, fine. I'm sure you'll probably be able to, it'll be on EA Play before long, because I don't think it's doing well. But anyways, we'll jump right into the review. Thanks for stopping by, and yeah. Alright, so first category up, and the only really major positive I'm going to give this game is going to be graphics and performance. So just real quick, the frame rate when in performance mode was excellent. It wasn't playable in quality. Seems to be the case with a lot of games nowadays, so I am going to deduct a point for that. But even in places where it felt like maybe the frame rate should struggle, it did pretty good. The only performance decrease I would notice is at times, some of the effects might blur slightly in like really heavily populated areas with like enemies and stuff. And like I said, quality mode's not playable, so I'll deduct for that. But other than that, it at least released in a playable state. It's just the problems are pretty much everywhere else. So good on them, at least for the performance. But that's about the most positive thing I'm going to have to say here.
Questions about Solus and mythology.
Alright, next up is art direction. And this one's always personal preference, so you could disagree with me here, but I'm just going to let you know how I feel. First of all, the environments actually look pretty good for the most part at first. They were pretty welcoming, like when you first walk in, you know, just kind of like warm and colorful and interesting. Although, like, when you kind of scratch beyond the surface, there really wasn't much there. A lot of times it was just a background. There wasn't really a lot to explore, but I'll get into that more in like game and level design. So as far as other art direction issues, armor is not very interesting looking, neither are the weapons. None of them really made me want to grind or search for loot. So enemy designs felt really cartoony, especially coming from the old games. It's like they're too colorful and like, I don't know, I guess just felt like, people call it Pixar animation. I don't know what you would call it, but it does. That is a kind of a good description. It just all has like a really cartoony look, which is never really like the calling card of the series. It always kind of went for more like a gritty, realistic depiction and art style. So the enemies just weren't menacing or scary or didn't feel threatening. They just kind of were funny to look at for the most part. The entire art design, I know everybody really talked about it a lot with the kind of Disneyfication or whatever, and I know everyone's seen and heard all about it, so I won't talk about it too much. But other than, I like the design of the dragons, which has stayed consistent from the prior games, but other than them, every single item, armor piece, weapon, character, enemy, even the effects were all off-putting to me, and they all felt out of place. Maybe it'd be fine if this was like a new like IP, but it definitely doesn't feel like Dragon Age. So I did not enjoy it at all. So this one will be a little harder to describe. Next I'm going to do with like game and level design. This is just kind of these are my categories obviously, and level design's like the playable area and did they design it where it's interesting and fun to explore. The level design was so weird in this game. It wasn't like the areas were tiny, but you kind of only got like little bite-sized areas and access to little areas at a time, and then you go back to the hub world and then back to the level you were in and then back to the hub world. And I don't know what the gameplay loop they were going for here was. It seems like I had heard rumors that this was going to be like a live service game, and I know EA kind of like made the announcement after Fortnite got so popular like 5 years ago that they were going to try to do that with all their games, and it seems like they kind of started to do that here and then decided like, oh shit, we need to release it, it's been 10 years, and then like just threw together what they had, because the design does feel like it's like little like partner, bring in your friend, you know, and your friend could maybe play like one of your companions through the area. It feels like that's what they were going for, but it is a single player game, so it just doesn't really fit. There's not a lot of exploration. And coming from Inquisition, man, that game, like before Elden Ring, was probably one of the, it's not open world, but the zones, there was so much to see, and it was like, other than Witcher or like Fallout or Skyrim, those type of games, it was one of the only other games I could think of, especially that long ago, where you could just kind of wander in an area and find like different enemies and items and quests, and there were all these mini games. Like, if you've never played the game, there were these astrariums where you'd have to trace the stars, and there was a lot of things that would like break up the action, so it was like, it gave the game like time to breathe in between the moments. And here it just feels like you're kind of going from one little quest to another. There's never really any distraction. The hub world sucks. Like, speaking on level design as well, one of the favorite like home bases I've ever seen in a game is probably in Inquisition. You start off with Haven at the beginning, and this is spoilers, obviously, 10-year-old game, but you have Haven at the beginning and it's pretty cool. And then like a little ways through the story, you have this moment where it feels like it might be the end of the game, but it's like really just like the first third, and then you have to sacrifice your base, and then you get this really awesome castle. And it was like so cool. I thought back then it was one of the first games where you could change the decor in your castle. You had to like repair it as you went. You'd need to find resources and things to upgrade it, and there was a lot of customization involved, and it seemed like, after you'd go on a long mission, it'd be kind of fun to go back there, and your companions would be wandering around and talking to each other and doing things and interacting. So it was a lot of fun. And then here, there's just a lighthouse, and it's the same place all the way through the game. And your companions all have like their own little house there. And if you want to talk to them, you can like go in their little house, and there they are. And then they'll give you another mission, and then you can go do that if you want. And then you come back, and I don't know, it feels like something's missing here. Like they were, again, it just feels rushed. If you haven't played Inquisition, go check it out, or at least like look up a video of Skyhold and see like what a downgrade this game is, like as far as just the hub area. And then obviously that equates to all the other level design as well. It's linear, and it kept doing this weird thing where areas would be blocked off, and you'd have to like do the quest that unlocks that door or that area, and then you'd come back and like your companion would unlock it, or the door would just be open that time, and like from then forward it would be open. But it just always a lot of backtracking and going back to places you went before, and the level design was really poor. It's especially for RPG, it's probably the least interesting and just the most boring I've seen in any game to this date that I can think of. It was terrible. Alright, so the gameplay. I will say, starting off, like Dragon Age has never really had like the most enthralling or like, you know, super edge of your seat gameplay system, but it all worked well with what it was. Originally it was like a real-time strategy game, and that evolved into what we had with Inquisition, which, you know, the combat was a little clunky compared to like, you know, this or any of the Souls games or Elden Ring or anything, but you could still do the real-time strategy combat system if you preferred that. But even though it was a little clunky, you kind of grew to love it because of the characters and the story, and there was like so much to consider when you were in battles. There was so much customization. You had different combinations of builds, effects of spells and weapons. You had different stats when you were flanking. You had to worry about high ground, and you'd have to outfit characters as support, DPS, tanks, and you know, have to worry about your squishy mage getting flanked and taken out, and position them correctly so they could, you know, take out enemies as you were soaking up damage, or vice versa. You could send in your tank and distract enemies while you buff the party or snipe from a distance. You could even switch characters, so you could switch over to Varric if you want and shoot with the crossbow. Here it's so simplified, it just becomes repetitive like within the first few hours. I played as a warrior, and it felt like it was just block, slash, ability, parry, rage mode over and over, you know, on repeat. And then the magic was just like a rock paper scissors simplified magic system. It felt like there was only a few spells like for each character, and you could only equip 3 of them. So, and then all you could do was call on your companions every 45 seconds. Other than that, they would just kind of jump in and like hit the enemy once or twice and then jump back out. They weren't very helpful at all. And on the subject of your companions, now they're invincible. So they don't do anything really when given orders, and you can't switch to them like an Inquisition, so it basically just feels like you're fighting all these unending hordes of enemies all alone, and you pretty much are. So as the difficulty ramps up towards the end game, they just throw more enemies at you, and they have larger and larger health pools. It's pretty crazy. I'm pretty sure I saw every enemy model like in the first 10 hours or so, and after that it's just kind of rinse and repeat. I could go on and on here and so much more. It felt like the combat system was ripped straight out of like God of War 2018. You even had the rage mode. It's literally called rage mode, and you push in both sticks just like God of War. You had the finishing moves where you push in your right stick after you'd stun an enemy. Yeah, it was like they ripped it straight off, which, you know, they probably could pull that off if they made it deep enough. But it's definitely not Dragon Age, and they just would have had to made the system like more interesting and have more there. There's just not much to do with it. It's far too simple to keep your interest throughout a game this long. And honestly, it gets tedious before the halfway mark to where you're kind of like dreading fighting. It doesn't become fun anymore.
Look, another one of those magical beams.
Alright, so for the sound design, it was fine. The sound effects were good for the most part. Music was good. You know, most of the acting was pretty great, as you'd expect from a BioWare game. The problem wasn't really here. There wasn't anything that knocked it out of the park for me. You know, like the main Dragon Age song in the past. You know, obviously we get that here at times, but there wasn't anything that was just truly amazing. But most of the sound effects sounded really good, and yeah. But that's just not enough to carry a game. So.
Well, wasn't expecting to fight an ogre today. Then again, I also didn't expect to learn that my gods are rampaging around and trying to end the world. Just one of those days.
And finally, we've got the story. So the story itself feels really watered down from past Dragon Age games. And we pretty much know it was, as the game narrative was completely overhauled and rewritten from the original title. They were first calling this game Dreadwolf, Dragon Age Dreadwolf, now it's Veilguard. During the development, the game, we know, changed codename at least like 3 or 4 times. And codenames for projects change when they decide to change like the direction of a project in the gaming industry. So basically, you'll know kind of right off the bat why they changed the game from Dreadwolf. The tension and suspense from Inquisition at the end, when you basically the game's left on this cliffhanger. I won't spoil anything, but it's like in the trailers for this game, what I'm talking about. But the tension is quickly subverted, like right off the bat. So right during the opening hours too. So without spoiling anything, the aforementioned former title character shows us quickly why the name Dreadwolf was dropped. So it's less interesting than I was expecting, coming from Inquisition in just about every way. In fact, throughout the game, I wouldn't expect any surprises, any deep moral decisions, no revelations, exciting or otherwise. The whole experience seems to be more streamlined, like in every single way. There's less opportunity for your interaction with characters, you have less dialogue options, and they don't even match what the options are when you're choosing your dialogue. So he'll say something like totally unrelated to what you select. Characters are occasionally interesting at times, but they're never likable, or definitely never Dragon Age interesting or likable. And most of them I really just had no opinion of either way. Although with some of them, I started to hate by the end of my playthrough. Instead of exposition and world building delivered via the dialogue and storytelling, it felt like I had to rely on note reading and glossary building and reading these missives I'd get after every mission from allies for any of the world building. And when I lost interest in the story, I just couldn't be bothered, so that went out the window. And there just really isn't one singular problem to point to here that I noticed while playing, but it's just less of this, less of that. And while, you know, maybe one of these things on their own may be excusable, the whole world suffers greatly, and it weaves together a much less interesting world and characters than Inquisition. I will say I did gain some interest in the story, as I left behind my expectations kind of right at the beginning, and just decided, okay, this isn't BioWare anymore. You know, like in the first 5 hours, it's not going to be what you expected. Just throw it out the window and go with it. But as I said before, I do these reading notes I take, but my note here says, immediately got worse as I went on. So it became obvious how little interaction there was with characters over time. And it's like each character had their own like little set side story. But it felt like you're just kind of deciding whether or not to participate in it. You had like the overarching main story. And then each character you would meet or have join you, they would have like their own. Every one of them had like their own little personal problem, and their like side mission had to do with like finding themselves type thing. Yeah, so they all had like some issue they were trying to deal with, and basically, instead of Veilguard's stories all kind of lining up and weaving together at the end, it felt like they all were just individual and unimpactful on the main story. And honestly, a lot of them felt like downright selfish, considering the entire world was being destroyed. You know, like in the main story, and then we're going back to the other one and, you know, worrying about how our mom feels about us, or, you know, the other one going to learn about her ancestors. It just was so all over the place. And a lot of the game just felt like, I'm sure everyone said this and heard this a million times, but it feels like therapy talk, and like all the dialogue is just so boring. It's just so safe 2024, like PC. Everybody's valued, everyone's a strong team member, learn to share your toys, children. It's like that's what you will get out of this game. And it's so wild. If you go back and play any of the other ones, they're so unapologetic and adult. And yeah, that's just not what we got here. So that's all I got to say on the story. Oh, this feels like such a weight off my shoulders. Finally, almost being done with this. Alright, let's wrap this up. So, it feels like I've seen a lot of other reviews, obviously, and I feel like everyone kind of nailed how the tone of this game feels off, and obviously some of the animation just doesn't feel like Dragon Age, you know, especially like some of the tone where it feels like therapy talk instead of what you expect coming from Dragon Age. But one thing I didn't hear anyone else mention was how this game didn't really offer any moments to kind of let the game and the tension breathe in between set pieces and battles. It just feels like you go from like one story, you know, plot point to set piece battle to set piece battle throughout the game. One quest to another, and there's just like never really any downtime. There's nothing else to do besides like the main story. In Inquisition, you know, you got to like go try to find all the shards or complete the Astrariums, you know, and then there was all types of like little side quests and little different, you know, you had to take out all the there were dragons to hunt down in all the areas, and some of them were pretty tough to find. So, you know, I was expecting some way to like kind of just relax in between moments here, and it just feels like you're going from one thing to another, and there's just never any time to like reflect on anything. You're just going, and there's no distractions. So I don't really know how to say that better, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I did expect this game to have issues coming in. Obviously, there were a lot of leaks about all the problems with it. And, you know, Inquisition before, it wasn't a perfect game. I think a lot of people had said it had problems nailing the tone from the other earlier games. I didn't really think so, but I know a lot of people thought that. And, again, it wasn't a perfect game. But the whole package came together and kind of made it one of my favorite games of all time. And I think that's what I expected here, was just kind of a Inquisition formula, you know, updated with the new story. And especially with it being a continuation of that story, it feels so weird how the gameplay and story and just atmosphere and everything is just completely different. It doesn't feel like a sequel. It feels like a different series. So, anyways, I think that's what I expected. Why would you take such a huge risk, you know, with such an established IP, especially one people have been waiting for 10 years for? But it's kind of weird too, because it felt like they were playing it safe in a lot of ways, and then other ways they took like huge risks. It's like the worst of both worlds, I guess. But yeah, this isn't Dragon Age. This could have been a middle of the road like action fantasy game if it had a different name. But as a Dragon Age game, it falls woefully short and is one of the worst times I've had playing a game in the last several years. So again, if you don't care anything about Dragon Age, you can probably check it out on EA Play when it comes out. I'm sure it will, because it's not doing great. But yeah, save your money, guys. Anyways, this has been Sweaty Zeus. Please let me know what you think below. I'm sorry this is kind of a sloppy review. It's just like I didn't have the heart to put in it. Like normally I try to make these like a little more polished, but this doesn't deserve it because it felt like they didn't give the effort to me, you know? So I guess you guys deserve my effort, but I'm already done now. So I probably should have thought of that. But anyways, been busy, a lot of stuff going on, you know, in my personal life, taking care of a family member, and yeah, so I just haven't had a lot of time for the whole YouTube thing, but should get back to that soon because things are going well. But anyways, guys, it's been good talking to you. Hopefully if you're new here, you'll stick around. I'm pretty friendly and fun to talk to. Hop in anytime if I'm live and chat with me about Dragon Age or whatever else is rocking around in the old noggin. And yeah, guys, have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. Take care.
Look at me! Don't you remember? They broke us into a million pieces, and this is all that's left.
Anger and pain. I couldn't bear it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
They built their world on the wreckage of us. Vengeance is all we have.